So everything we do in our fancy scientific way that we do it is trying to design ways to climb the mountain and drop the person back into the other side of the mountain towards good health.
Right.
We're very passionate about this, not just because the science is exciting and how cool is it to be thinking about how to make a chronic illness that's been around for 30 years go away. That's pretty awesome kind of goal. But also that we're helping our veterans to serve this country, and they deserve this.
Hi, I'm Haylie Pomroy, the Assistant Director of the Integrative Medicine Program at the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. I have the distinct pleasure of being your host today for our podcast, Hope and Help for Chronic Disease and Fatigue. I have two incredible guests today. I have Dr. Nancy Klimas, the Director of the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine, and Sergeant First Class Retired Jimmy Arocho. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Klimas, you have created this incredible institute. Can you tell me a little bit about our work right now with Gulf War illness?
I would be happy to. A lot of people may not realize that during the many conflicts in the Gulf, there have been different types of toxic exposures that our veterans have seen and have had health consequences. So at the first Gulf War, the 1990-91 Gulf War, when Kuwait was liberated by Jimmy and his many colleagues, which was amazing, there was this perfect storm of toxic exposures. It was dreadful. Between the organophosphates that were being used as pesticides, sarin gas that was actually released into the atmosphere during the conflict and shortly afterwards, and the amazingly intense exposures to oil well fires, our Gulf War veterans' poor little detoxification systems got overwhelmed, and about 1 in 3 became chronically ill. It has now been 32 years since the Gulf War, and 1 in 3 Gulf War veterans, 1 in 3 of the 800,000 plus veterans that went to the Gulf from the United States are still ill today from the exposures that they had at that time. It's a terrible illness. And basically what happened was they had a pretty bad toxic hit that affected their brain and caused a chronic brain inflammation, chronic brain oxidative stress situation that resulted in just a sort of vicious cycle of chronic ill health ever since.
And Jimmy, Dr. Klimas just alluded to that you were there.
Yes.
And so can you share a little bit about your experience being there, what it was like being there, and if you were cognizant or aware of this exposure as you were having it?
Oh, very cognizant. Yes, I did deploy to the Persian Gulf War, 1990, 1991. We call it Desert Shield, Desert Storm, 2 major campaigns. The Desert Shield was mostly in defense. The Desert Storm was the military operations where we liberated Kuwait. We were all cognizant of the airborne hazards. We monitored chemical alarms that were going off. We had Scud attacks, which are basically missile attacks from overhead. The oil well fires, which was done as an offensive measure to cloud the battlefield and to show the anger of the enemy. Experienced every bit of that in the 7-month deployment.
And that I can't even fathom what that was like. And Dr. Klimas, I'm going to take just a step back here for a second. At the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine, we do tremendous amount of translational research. We have quite an intimate relationship with the veterans healthcare centers. Can you give me a little bit, or just like our listeners, a little bit of indication of how this relationship came about?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Actually, from the very start, when we created the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine, I had already had a 25-year history at the Miami VA with an active research portfolio and a laboratory and all of that with my colleagues at the time at the University of Miami. And we sort of wrapped that all up and moved it up the street to Nova Southeastern University, still in partnership with the VA. So to this day, I still have my laboratories. I have laboratories at the VA, and we have a very amazing clinical research program that's based at the Miami VA in partnership with the Institute for Neuro-Immune Medicine. And we have at our sites also labs and clinical research as well as clinical care programs.
And Jimmy, you have a very special place with us at INIM. Can you share with our community how the relationship began and how it's evolved over time?
I appreciate that, because that's an introduction to the level of advocacy that I started out with the INIM, and then subsequent took a job with the INIM, which was really awesome. I was actually reading Dr. Klimas's productions, her work, and I was reading one of her studies, and I moused over her name, and her email appeared. I was,
and there it began.
There it began. I emailed her immediately, and I will tell you most directly what I encountered. I encountered the most kind, caring, committed doctor I've ever met in my entire life. And here we are today.
And so were you personally dealing with some of the symptoms associated with GWI? Were you working with?
In involving myself with research, what I discovered was understanding more about what was going on with my body, putting labels on what was going on with my body, so that when I went back to my primary care doctor at the Veterans Administration, I was having much better conversations, letting the doctor understand what was going on. So at the same time I was experiencing the wonders of research, I was taking this back to the VA for clinical support. And subsequently, I was ultimately diagnosed with Gulf War illness. It took some time. Would have never made it there without the research, without Dr. Klimas. Thank you, Dr. Klimas.
He says such an important thing, because so many veterans who have had these toxic exposures haven't associated their illness that they have with the toxic exposure.
Exactly.
And so they are just out there floating, not understanding what's going on. And so the VA has become incredibly aware of the downstream effects of toxic exposures. This whole recent PACT Act was really wrapped around taking responsibility as a country for the harm's way that we put our active duty personnel.
Can I ask you just to mention that act one more time, please?
The PASC Act, PASC. It was just the last, 2 years that the PASC Act came into being, but it basically gave the VA the resources to do what's right, both in terms of disability payments, but also in terms of training, legions of physicians to be more in tune with and understand what they're seeing when someone walks in with a toxic injury.
And from what I understand, it's just difficult, both from the individual that's dealing with this, but also for so many physicians to identify this. Can you help the people that are sitting out here, and can you give me the time span also that we're looking at? You had mentioned early on the time of the conflict and the time of the exposure that we're studying right now.
Right. So in Gulf War illness, which is just one of many toxic exposures our poor veterans have been through, but in Gulf War illness, the conflict was in 1990 and 1991.
Okay.
It's a 7-month
Deployment, yes.
Deployment in most cases, or some people that stayed a lot longer to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, in that period of time, as I said, these veterans had a tremendously excessive exposure. Work by our group and others has demonstrated that the people that were at greatest risk for these, for staying sick, you could sort it out, because we discovered that genetically they were slow detoxifiers, that they basically could accumulate poison. They couldn't get it out of their bodies fast enough. So now we understand, from a lot of hard work by our group, the group in Houston, and some other really outstanding investigators, that there was an obvious problem.
So can you help me grasp? I understand the exposure. Now I do. Thank you. Mm-hmm. How would this present? How did this present in your patients? How is this presenting in the individuals that you are with and spend time with? How does that present? You have to give me the right term. I want to use the term colleague, but I think it's much more than that when you're in military service together.
Well, we're a cohort.
A cohort.
Yes, we're a cohort.
I love that.
We're a deployed cohort of actually 700,000 that deployed to the Persian Gulf War, 1990, 1991, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Very specific cohort, very specific in the focus by the research clinicians on this challenge.
Wonderful. And so there's been some real variables that are defined with that cohort or that group of individuals. Dr. Klimas, what are the patients presenting like? If someone's out there and they're maybe dealing with a lot of different things going on in their bodies, how can they identify this?
So people have been aging as this goes on, since we're talking 32 years. So you can imagine early on that what people were presenting with when they first came back in the first 4 or 5 years afterwards: skin rashes, profound fatigue, body aches, what people call brain fog, trouble concentrating and thinking, GI, a lot of GI disturbances. And because they had an awful lot of burn pit and oil exposures, a lot of lung bronchitis and chest things. As time went by, in the first 10 years, there was also a series of cases of cancer that have worried everyone. There wasn't enough to trigger a huge risk, but Joe Biden's son is a good example, right? A Gulf War veteran who died of brain cancer. We actually saw these rare cancers for a while. Since then, a little less of that, but now as people are getting older and they're in their 50s and 60s and even their 70s, a quarter to a third of the veterans were reservists, so they're already older when they got there.
Right.
So we have some veterans of that war now that are actually in their 90s that were in their 30s and 40s when they were deployed.
Right.
So or even older. So anyway, now where they're at is that they have that brain fog. It's a great big thing: attention, concentration, mental fatigue, trouble concentrating. The body aches and pains, often they'll carry the diagnosis of fibromyalgia because it's something we do know how to diagnose. Sometimes they carry the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome.
Absolutely.
And veterans that have pursued their disability have often been labeled correctly with these comorbid conditions, and that to help them as they went through the process of documenting their illness. But irritable bowel is also another common comorbidity. And most of the chest stuff is mostly cleared up, but there's still some chronic bronchitis and that type of thing.
So we're seeing a lot of individuals that are affected by this. Would you say out of the 700,000 people that were exposed?
Well, 700,000 deployed, about 1 in 3 came back with chronic multi-symptom illnesses.
Okay.
That's according to the Veterans Administration.
And do you feel like those are the individuals that have actually made it known that they're dealing with this? Or do you have concern that there's more people struggling? There's more people struggling.
There's more. I mean, because when I'm recruiting a study, and you recruit a study for healthy controls, deployed controls.
Absolutely.
And then you look at people who are sick. And these people identify as sick. These healthy people, when you come and do their
labs
evaluation, you're like, not so healthy.
Yeah.
So then you realize that some people have just been, dogging through this thing and trying to bowl through life with it, despite they're carrying a fairly heavy load of symptoms.
Purpose at the Institute and our relationship with the VA is to do more trials, more studies, develop a treatment plan. Can you give me some indication of what the goal set is here?
The Institute's overall mission is to help people with complex medical conditions. And there are different illnesses that sort of fall into that bag. The post-viral illnesses. Now, post-COVID is a common, long COVID, common illness that we're now exploring. ME/CFS, which is frequently a post-viral illness. And the Gulf War illness patients. And what they have in common, these 3 illnesses, is that the symptoms are very similar because what's going on in the brain is very similar.
So the body's response.
Yeah. So you can imagine, here's the brain, grand central for everything you do. It's in charge of, your blood pressure and your pulse and the rate that your gut is digesting things and so on. It's in charge of all your endocrine things. It's in charge of releasing anti-inflammatories from the endocrine system when you need them. So the immune system, the endocrine system, the brain, they're so tied together. So here we have a group of people, all these different illnesses, but what they have in common is this brain hit that got them at the beginning, creating a cycle of inflammation in the brain as well as the body, but the brain and oxidative stress. Those two are so tied together.
Help me for a moment. pencils and crayons, just for the people like myself.
Pencils and crayons are so cute. I love it when you say that. Pencils and crayons.
Talk to me about oxidative stress for a minute.
So oxidative stress is, you hear it a lot. And
Yes.
a lot of people take antioxidants. So
Yes.
there's that. And it's got to do with your body's ability to manage the trash of energy. Every cell has to make energy.
Right.
And in making energy, it flips out some free radicals. And typically they're grabbed up by a system that's in that cell and recycled back into energy. And in a perfect world, this perfect little figure eight of things is going on where you make energy, clean up the mess, make energy, clean up the mess, recycling all this.
So the
stuff you
infrastructure
need.
of the
Yeah.
cell is
Beautiful.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
When that fails, and inflammation can make it fail.
Right.
But so can lots of other things, including
Toxins, viruses.
and lack of nutrients.
Yes.
Really important nutrients you need to maintain it. So if that fails and that figure eight starts looking a little skinny on one side, now you have a real problem in that cell. And
Got
it's
it.
going to make free radicals. It has to get rid of them and flips them out of the cell. Sometimes it flips the whole damaged energy unit, the mitochondria, out of the cell. And now you've got a setup for a vicious cycle of inflammation because the immune system sees that and has to react. The immune system drives more oxidative stress, makes more free radicals, and it goes on and on and on. And 32 years later, you're looking at the brain of someone whose insult was 32 years ago.
Right. And the continued insult of daily not being able to resolve it,
Yes,
set a new homeostasis or a new status of health.
right. And we do a lot of that work in our group talking about homeostasis.
Yes.
Which is, there's a homeostasis, a network of a balance of good health, and that there's a network or balance of chronic ill health. And between these two is not a straight line, but a mountain.
Yes.
So everything we do in our fancy scientific way that we do it is trying to design ways to climb the mountain and drop the person back into the other side of the mountain towards good health.
right.
So it's a very fascinating area of science. It's incredibly important. And perhaps later in this thing, I'll tell you some of the science we're doing that way. But this is, we're very passionate about this, not just because the science is exciting and how cool is it to be thinking about how to make a chronic illness that's been around for 30 years go away.
Yes.
That's pretty, awesome kind of goal, but also that we're helping our veterans to serve this country, and they deserve this. They deserve everything that we can do to try to get them right again.
And yes, Jimmy, you do.
Thank you.
And absolutely. And that brings me to my question is, you are a very dynamic human being. You have a lot of things to spend your time with.
Sure.
What is the inspiration and the motivation for all that you put into this? What is your hope for people that are out there?
Hope is awesome, and my hope started with unpackaging the wonderful information that Dr. Klimas shared. So just imagine, as an advocate, I would take all this information in and then make it so that veterans could understand it. So just break down the components. The VA was starting to kick in the early days, and they labeled the presumptives, which were chronic fatigue syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, and fibromyalgia, were the three presumptives associated. Those are clinical side, associated with Gulf War illness.
So there's a direct correlation,
There's
is what
a
you're
direct
saying.
correlation.
So
and I
that
took
exposure caused those things to happen in the body.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. That's
Okay.
correct. Early day. So the VA, of course, the VA is not at the leading edge of research, but it gave me enough to start taking this advocacy out to veterans, which initially the advocacy started to get traction and quickly became outreach and recruitment, because the reciprocal of all of this knowledge was participation in INM research. So it was the best combination of two things were happening. Very tough to keep up. I'm a layman, so I'm keeping up with this research doctor that's leading in the nation, that her name is known and her work is known. And I'd say, look, I work for her. And this is what you can expect.
What we can do.
Yes, you can now have an expectation for quality of life. You can have expectation for understanding what's going on with your body. Again, expectations for better conversations with your healthcare providers and the Veterans Administration. Part of our system also includes benefits, something that the Veterans Administration, the Veterans Benefits Administration calls compensation and pay, which is an integral part of injury on the battlefield. So that was part of the messaging as well. We took that to here we are today.
So I want to see if I understand this correctly. Sure. So with veterans right now, we have a population, and that population is in need. The synergy that I see here is that we have this cutting edge research happening at the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine. And so to marry those two together gives our veterans access to research that's happening in your institute. Is that correct?
Right. The Institute is set up to do basically everything that we felt like a gaps analysis, if you would. What would be the most exciting way to set up an institute that could translate what has been decades of basic science work, laboratory work, that has really started to give us the underpinnings of this complicated illness, and be able to take that information, design studies, and move it to the human. On the same side, we do clinical care. So we have our clinicians are taking care of veterans with Gulf War illness and other conditions, both here and the clinicians at the VA. And so we're doing it all. We're taking care of veterans. We're doing bench work. We're doing translational work. And there's a little space between bench and translation that we also do, which is the animal studies or the in vitro studies, proof of concept studies. So if you throw that together, and one of the ways we approach this is to use, now it's called AI, but we
artificial intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, but we just called it really smart people that do computational
that know how to use computers really well.
Because and they do things that you mere mortals don't understand. They use things like chaos theory to try to connect the dots. So we would do. Here's our favorite study, and the one that really launched our Gulf War cutting edge work. This illness is made worse when people exercise. People have really poor exercise tolerance. Well, instead of calling that the focus of our work, we used it as an opportunity to say, hey, we have a way to look at what the mediators of relapse might be. So let's put people on a bike. You think our guys would let us put them on the bike? And they have. Men and women Gulf War vets have signed up for this amazing study that we've completed, that we put them on a bike with a whole metabolic thing where you're breathing a mask and measuring all kinds of stuff, with an IV line in your arm that we're drawing bloods from frequently. And we drew bloods 9 times. We put them on the bike about 8 minutes because they don't have much exercise capacity. We bring them right up to the threshold. It was called the aerobic threshold. But beyond that, they would have had a serious relapse, so we didn't press them beyond. But we drew bloods at the beginning at the threshold at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, the next day, nine times, 9 tubes, 9 different blood draws. And in those tubes of blood, we measured every neuropeptide, like all the hormones, all the cytokines, the things the immune system makes, the types of cells that were circulating in the immune system, how well they worked. And here's the big one, gene expression. So what genes got turned on or off in response to the exercise challenge. Not just knowing that before and after, but in what order, order of go.
Absolutely.
So if 24 hours after you've exercised, you're in a relapse, and I drew a tube of blood, I'd find a lot of things wrong there, but I wouldn't know what started it. And if I wanted to just treat these, I'd be treating the tail of the dog. But if I want to really understand what happened in the first 5 minutes that induced the whole thing, I better have gotten a tube of blood at the 5-minute mark. And so that's what we did. Okay.
So that type of a study, which requires that we have individuals that participate in the studies, is critical to develop the care to make the patient better. Right?
Exactly right.
So is part of your role getting individuals involved in these studies?
Yes, it is. It's essential to my role. I get to share. I mean, I'm a very fortunate person because I get to share the excitement and
he
get
did
to
the
share.
bike. He was on the bike.
I did the bike. I did that. If you don't mind me saying, post-exertional malaise was a real big deal to deal with because it's like a big blanket on you, big wet blanket on you, and it just really drags you down.
And it doesn't make sense to, I think, to a person who's used to getting benefit from physicality,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
Most
right.
people in the military, I mean, one of the reasons the training is so intense. So it was really, when I was reading about that, it was such a dichotomy
Yes.
as to what we train our men and women that are in the military to do.
Mhm.
Be fit, be physical, and now we're
They're
in a
warriors.
situation, be warriors. Yeah. And we're in a situation where taking that action creates a flare or a relapse or the disease to express itself even more strongly. That was very profound for me to read about individuals like yourself and the research that they're doing. Can you share some words of wisdom for individuals that are dealing with this, that might be open to or considering coming into a trial? What was that experience like for you? Was it a positive outcome? Did you love us when you got to us? What was that experience like? We want people to feel familiar with us and comfortable with us and know that we're working tirelessly every day to find solutions.
That's an excellent question, because we don't know what we're getting into, and there's so many messages and different messages and confusion. We're veterans. Like Dr. Klimas said, we're warriors. We're concerned. Why am I degrading? What's going on there? And when those answers start pouring in, and they do pour in, it's amazing what you start connecting the dots and you understand, wow, environmental exposure? I was exposed in that 7-month period during the Desert Shield, Desert Storm, 1990, 1991 Persian Gulf War. Yes, you were. And that realization, it made me turn off all the naysayers. And I have to be honest, the naysayers were coming from the Veterans Administration, not in a negative way, but in a way that we really don't understand either.
Right.
So I don't understand. My doctor doesn't understand. But that research doctor I saw last week, she had answers,
Right.
not the definitive answers, but let's do this.
Right.
And I mean, talking about
and measure it.
and measure
And make sure,
Yes.
yeah. And that's what's so important with
Yes.
the research, right?
That
Is that we're not shooting in the dark. We're not just trying to do something and kind of wishful thinking, hope. There's parameters that are set
Yes.
up to actually measure, either absolutely the right direction and double down on it, or not the right direction and pivot.
Yes, if you're a Persian Gulf War veteran and you have questions about what's going on in your body, you owe it to yourself to turn the page, go to the next step, ask the questions, have the conversations. There's no requirement to jump into this swimming pool or this warm tub. Just ask the questions. We have people that answer phones and can answer those questions that can lead to onboarding into research, which is a powerful outcome.
Dr. Klimas, I know that people listening to this podcast, there's going to be people that have either themselves or a loved one or a dear friend or a family member that is dealing or had this exposure. How can they participate with our studies and trials?
There's so many different ways to find out more information. At our institute, we have a webpage, which is great, and it has a research section, and under there's Gulf War, and we have a lot of Gulf War clinical trials. I think there's 6 or 7 open trials right now that are
that's
interventive
wonderful.
trials, the intervention studies.
So
And then
I'm going to ask you, what's an intervention study? What's
that
the
means-
difference there?
Okay, there's different kinds of studies that people can volunteer for.
Right?
One of our easiest studies is called B-Brain. Is they just come in, we do a medical evaluation, they fill out some self-report forms, and we draw some blood. That creates a biorepository that the whole nation's scientists in Gulf War illness are dipping into regularly. That biorepository is supporting at least 30 other investigators in the country so that they don't have to recruit people. They can just call up and ask for samples of well-identified subjects. So the B-Brain is a really important study. It's out of Boston University, but our site's the biorepository. And veterans can come to the B-Brain through the Boston University website, which they just could Google Boston
I'll get them
University.
that.
And, yeah.
Yep.
Great. And they could find a site near them that's a part of B-Brain. It's all over the country. And then samples are sent to our laboratory. We're the biorepository, and then we're the ones that pull the samples. But we're also site, and people can come to our VA site for B-Brain, and they would, that's not an intervention study, but it's an incredibly important study. You can imagine how if you have to stop and recruit subjects, you just took 2 years before you started your work.
So
versus having it in the freezer and pull it out and ship it to me and let's get going.
that's wonderful. So how many individuals would we be looking for in that?
B-Brain's got, I think, a goal of around 400 people. It's a little more than halfway done.
Okay.
So we're looking for another 100 or more people across the country.
And do they need to be in Florida?
No, anywhere in the country. If they go to the website for B-Brain, they would see a site nearest them, but there's sites all over the country.
Wonderful.
And that's a great way to go. But that's not an intervention study. So you asked me the difference between intervention and not. The not intervention studies are teaching us what's going on here. All right. So we'd get blood. We do like the exercise challenge I just talked to, the first ones we did. Those were all, let's learn a whole lot more about this illness so we can project what interventions we might be able to use. So they're all moving towards intervention, but they're not a treatment study.
But we currently have very exciting interventional studies going on. Can you tell us about those?
So, yes. So there's a consortia that's funded by the DoD called the Gulf War Illness Clinical Trials and Interventions Consortia. We call it GWICTIC.
GWICTIC, I like that.
GWICTIC. And it's got 6 sites across the country that are a consortia of sites that are recruiting study subjects into different interventions. And it was developed from the DoD to try to, again, speed up and move out new translation studies that need to be moved into patient use. So they call that translation studies. When you go from the bench to the very first phase 1 study or a phase 2 study, the second phase of that when you're doing more people.
So the therapy in question is being actually administered.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Administered to the patient.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a typical clinical trial, there's what's called randomization. You come into a study. Like we have a study called NAC, just about to start, N-acetylcysteine. Very exciting study, launching in the next 2 weeks. And national study all over the place and virtual. Anybody in the entire country can be recruited. And if you're nowhere near a VA, you could still be recruited into this study, which is exciting because there's a virtual arm. Anyway, the NAC study is an example of a study that's a phase 2 study, meaning that we already know it's safe. We already know it's got some promise. We need to know a whole lot more so that we
And this is a natural supplement, right?
A natural supplement.
Okay.
NAC.
Nutraceutical grade or
it's a
pharmaceutical
nutraceutical. Yeah. Yep. People can buy NAC. And it is, in your body, it's turned into something called glutathione, which is that thing that grabs those free radicals I was talking about. So you need a lot of glutathione in your cells to be able to keep this whole machinery well balanced. And NAC not only does that, it does it in the brain. One of the problems that we have with all of our studies, and we envision things, is that in a dish or in a computer model, we can find these answers. But if it doesn't get to the target tissue, which is the brain, what good is it? It's something called the blood-brain barrier. And if it doesn't cross, well then. So we're not only looking for the things that could help our veterans, but also does it get to the target tissue and can it work? So that study, the NAC study, is part of the GWICTIC.
How many individuals are we looking for that?
180. I think
180. Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. That's a big study.
Yeah, and
that's been very promising in phase 1.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah, and Dr. Shunga, who's one of the co-PIs of this study, did a preliminary study where you can use an image called MRS spectroscopy. When you put an MRI, everyone knows what an MRI is. An MRI, but it's MRI with some fancy math afterwards that can look in your brain and tell you if you have oxidative stress in your brain and where. And he did an early study with NAC in Gulf War veterans and another one in MECFS patients. And he could reverse to normal oxidative stress with NAC. So he got it across and he could show an imaging change. So we're incredibly jazzed about this study.
That's exciting.
It's an incredibly important study. And of course, veterans will know that if we don't prove stuff, it's not on the formulary. So if we can't prove it, then it won't be accessible to veterans. So we really need to.
So we need 180 individuals.
We do.
That were in that time period, and that may or may not be experiencing or have been identified with GWI, correct? I mean, do they have
may
to have
not
that?
know, but
Do they have
can-
to have that diagnosis before they can sign up for the study?
No, they just have to have the symptoms.
Wonderful.
Right? So that
Okay.
there's a screening tool when you first sign up
Okay.
that we go through on the phone and just see if they meet the basic criteria.
That's great. So we'll
And
help them through that process.
That'd
Awesome.
be super. But I was talking in this concept of this about placebo control, because in the NAC study, it's a placebo control study because it's a big study. So people are randomized to get the drug or to get placebo, and then we compare those two groups.
That's great.
Yeah, a lot of people are concerned that they might get the placebo, but if people are understanding in research that we have to do it right to give them truth and answers, and that these studies are short, that we can get answers pretty quickly.
How long is the study?
Oh, Lord, you would have asked me a question I don't know the answer to.
That's okay. We don't have to answer it.
I think it's a 4-month intervention, but I'd have to go back.
Okay.
So I'm
No, I
should
scratch
know
that question. No, that's
yeah.
a lot for one. Everything else that brain is held on to, I'm already in shock. So that's okay.
So actually, I was going to say for that study and for the record that the PIs of this study are the consortia, the Gulf Wellness Consortia. I'm the principal investigator with our colleagues at RTI. So
What's
which
RTI?
Is, the place. It's a independent company that manages the data and the
Oh, wonderful.
platforms, the stats, and a lot of the quality assurance issues. We have an extremely professional group there.
That's great.
And the consortia has multiple projects with different PIs. So the meaning principal investigators. So I am not the principal investigator of this study. Dr. Sullivan, Kim Sullivan, and Dr. Shungu, Dakoma Shungu, are co-PIs of this study, and they're amazing scientists. And this is going to be the coolest study. Some of the people in this study are also getting the imaging done, depending on where they live and if they're near one of the sites that can do the imaging.
That's
So the
exciting.
people in the New York and Boston area will go in and get the images done too.
What I understand is that doing this kinds of research is critical. We know there's a problem. We know individuals are struggling with this problem. There's some very exciting treatment on the forefront. So, Jimmy, what would you tell individuals that are struggling with these types of symptoms? What's critical that they act on right now?
The most critical thing that I dealt with personally was quality of life, because I have family, I have friends. I want to wake up every day and be active, be integral in my community, come in and do advocacy and work with the INIM, with Dr. Klimas, et cetera. So quality of life is critical.
So what action do people need to take? Should they participate in these trials? Do we need volunteers?
Yes.
What is it?
We do.
Just shout it out.
Yes.
just it's a challenge accepted. Damn it! I mean, come on.
Let's do this. Yeah.
You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for us. You're doing it for the team. There's not only the immediate demand, but as Dr. Klimas will bring out, there's some concerns about neurodegenerative issues in later stage or early stage presentation of these of challenges. Time is limited. We live on a spectrum. Some of us are not as well off as others, and if we don't act, if we don't do this for ourselves, it's just tick-tock. Time is flying, and we're missing the opportunity today.
And I also think that by participating in these studies and trials, you're helping your comrades. You're helping the individuals that were there shoulder to shoulder with you, right?
Yes.
We gain so much information from individuals like you participating in these studies and trials. You're empowered by it. Your life is changed by it.
Yes.
But it doesn't end there. You impact all the people that you were there with as well,
Right.
by allowing an institute like the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine to explore what's going on in the body and have the passion to wake up every day with the intention to find solutions. And so, Dr. Klimas, what do we need people to do?
So I can tell you that people ask me, why does it take so long to have something actually get into the hands of the people who need it? And I will answer it as someone who's very experienced. Recruitment. If it takes me 4 years to fill a study, that's 4 years that you had to wait. So it's taking me 4 years to fill studies. Let's get real. And the pandemic did not help one little bit. So if there is any way to tell folks clearly and in a way that rings every bell, please get in these studies so that we can get this out to you. I cannot promise you a study intervention that was successful unless I do the study. And I can't do the study unless I have enough people to do the study. So,
and we're talking about a
recruitment.
population of over 700,000 individuals.
Mhm.
But we need 180, 400
Exactly.
people to step up and allow us the opportunity to help them.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're asking. And we're asking it from the bottom of our hearts and with gratitude for the service.
Absolutely.
That
And
was-
with deep creativity, because even though we were dealing with COVID, where we were locked down, the INIM was so resourceful that they came up with virtual way to participate, virtually in the way that you in your own hometown from your private home
Right.
can participate. You find a blood lab. We help you find a blood lab in your community, but it's facilitative. It comes to you. There's little reason not to participate. Again, I throw out the challenge to my colleagues. Come join in. The water's warm.
So as the host, I'm going to commit to you guys that I'm going to shorten the gap between getting to us from where you are today to getting to us at INIM so that you can start the process of participating in one of these trials, this research, and not only help your own health trajectory, but level up the health trajectory of everybody that was over there with you.
Level up.
Level up. Let's do it.
So let me just do a quick little spit on what we're trying to recruit.
Yep.
Just real quick. It's not time enough to talk about each one. But this Gulf Wellness Clinical Trials Consortia, which is amazing.
I don't know what a consortium means.
Okay. So the Gulf Wellness Clinical Trials Consortia is a consortia, meaning a group of people that came together to try to do it better. It implies that there's multiple sites and that they work collaboratively together.
Okay.
So this particular consortia is working with the New Jersey VA, the Houston VA, the Palo Alto VA, Boston, Miami. But we also have other sites. People use our consortia to move their ideas forward. So when I was talking before that your basic scientist can have this genius idea that's ready to translate, but if they don't have partners to translate it, it dies on the desk. Right? You can do your whole life's work and never move it to actual human use because you didn't have a clinical partnership to do it. So this is the clinical partnership. So a PhD can come to me and say, let's move this forward. And we do. So we have studies going on at Roskamp Institute, Houston. We have another one at Waco. We're helping other scientists, Dr. Younger in Alabama. We're helping other people either get their studies off the ground or actually perform their studies for them, or recruit their studies for them. So we're trying to help everyone we can, and it's not just our little Miami group that's engaged in this. It's a national thing. The call to action for this is that we have the consortia. It was the advocacy of the Gulf Wellness community that helped convince Congress to pay for this. And we put it all together and we are trying to implement it in our strongest possible way. We have multiple trials, 7 or 8 trials right now go underway. We need study subjects. Reach out and volunteer for this study. If you can't be a patient or a study subject in the study, but you know Gulf War vets, use your social media to roll this out. Please send our links out, send our message out, get people to know about us because we're trying to find you.
So we're going to put the links here available for you. But if I understand this correctly, we've put the time, energy, effort, gotten the resources together to put a ton of brilliant people that are like-minded that want to move this forward. And now what we need is veterans to step forward and participate in the trials.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That is the bottom line.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we also need your help in spreading the word. There's a lot of chatter out there and there's a lot of promises out there and there's a lot of conversation that maybe isn't netted the help that we need to get the veterans, and we need to get it as quickly as possible. Time's ticking, as you keep saying. I love that. Tick, tick. Yeah. So please make sure that you sign up, that you spread the word, that you help us on our mission to get the help that's needed for the individuals that are dealing with symptoms associated with GWI. And Dr. Klimas, if you can just share with us one more time.
You just go to our webpage and you click on the link that is on the Gulf Wellness Research Studies. It's a super short little survey that just tells us who you are and how to contact you, and if you were ill or not ill, if you're a control or if you're a sick person. But the big thing, permission to contact. And then we will circle back and send you all kinds of information about our work, and we'll reach out to you. So thank you.
I need Persian Gulf War veterans. I need Persian Gulf War veterans that returned from the Persian Gulf War, 1990, 1991, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that have concerns about their health, any problems, anything that they would like to have a discussion with research clinicians to bring out the possibility of one having Gulf War illness is extremely important. There's nothing to beat around the bush with. Our website is well laid out. There are hyperlinks that include contact directly to me. And what I want you to do right now is we have a very short survey, a 3-question survey. I've taken it myself, very simple, that identifies you as a Persian Gulf War veteran and allows us to contact you. You have to opt in for us to reach you.
So people who participate in studies have other added benefits. The real reason to be in it is because you're for the greater good, that you're teaching us what we need to know to be able to help the most people. But you personally do get benefits. We do thorough evaluations. We do hundreds of dollars worth of lab work. We do a lot of personal work. And often, just by virtue of meeting our entry criteria, we validate that you have the illness, and it helps with the disability assessments and all that type of thing. So while we press a lot on do this because it's the right thing to do, it's also a good thing for you to do personally.
And so this can give a person access to maybe resources that they haven't been able to get access to.
Yes, and deep looks into their own bodies.
Awesome. That's great.
Some other time we'll talk about Project In Depth, which actually involves a 2-week inpatient stay at the NIH where they look at all the way down to them intracellular level. So what is going on?
That's great. So there's people that can participate in their own home and people that can come inpatient and participate as well.
Exactly right.
Wonderful.
It's pretty cool.
What else?
We're going to get the answer to this. Before we run out of time, I need to mention our long COVID study.
Perfect.
It's called COVID Up, which is COVID, Understanding the Post-Viral Phase. Great name, because we like to do that in science, like make complicated names. But the idea is that there are a group of people in this country, probably in the 1 million+ range, who never completely recovered from COVID. Some of them didn't recover because COVID damaged something important like their heart or their lungs or their kidney. But those are the small numbers. The huge number are these people that have a post-viral illness that looks for all the world like an illness that we have been studying for 30+ years. Myalgic encephalomyelitis / chronic fatigue syndrome. So CFS, or chronic fatigue syndrome, has been around for a long time. See the gray hair? One of my very first papers I published when I was just a little baby doctor was on chronic fatigue syndrome in the early stages. I've been doing it that long. And we've got a lot of experience with ME/CFS patients and with research. And it was our question whether or not these long COVID patients had the same thing or not, or could we apply things we've learned from ME/CFS to help our long COVID patients and perhaps get them into a better health state sooner. So the CDC, bless them, funded us to do a comparator study. And we are busily recruiting hundreds of long COVID patients into a platform where they do self-report stuff about themselves. And from that group, we pull in a subgroup of 200 people. It's a big study to bring into our clinics and do what's called a deep phenotyping study, where we're looking at doing echoes and looking at their hearts and lungs, but we're really looking intensely at their immune systems and their cell functions and things like that to see if we can find the underpinnings of long COVID, and if it looks a lot like the same thing we're seeing in ME/CFS or not, so that we can understand that. So this is a study that's been hard to recruit because it's a South Florida study. People have to be able to come into our clinic. So that's regionally a South Florida study. And we were reaching out to them through their hospital systems. And we sent out, I'm not exaggerating to say that there's been at least 80,000 emails sent out. But we've all been trained not to click on emails.
Right.
So you send out 15,000 emails and you get 300 people. Literally, that's all. 300 people open the email. Oh man, it's just killing us to recruit the study because people don't even know we're doing it, even though they've been invited to be a participant.
So these are individuals that are dealing with COVID long hauler symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to live in South Florida.
Yep. They're either long haulers or they're not. They're people who had COVID at any time during the pandemic.
Okay.
They had COVID and they either recovered or they didn't. And they can volunteer through either one of those doors.
And how many people are we looking to recruit?
We were hoping for 800 when we started out. We'd be happy if we get the 200 in. We're going to stop when we get to the number that we're trying to bring in for phenotyping. And I think we've only gotten about 60 or 70. We have 280 people in the study right now, and we have maybe 70 or 80 that were eligible for the next step.
Okay.
So we need to double those numbers up.
Okay.
We need probably another 300 to be able to fill it out.
So right now we're looking for 300 individuals that had COVID,
Mm-hmm.
whether they recovered or did not recover.
Yeah. And we'd like a lot of unrecovered people in that.
So specifically, I'd like to see individuals that have some symptoms associated with COVID long haulers that haven't reached full recovery.
Exactly.
And we need that now.
Exactly right. And the symptom we're really most interested in to start is this fatigue. Every time I try to do something, I feel like I want to just lay up sorry afterwards. That is the symptom that is central to ME/CFS, and it seems to be central to long COVID. So we're grabbing the fatigue patients up, and if they have other symptoms, we're counting those too. We're doing a good evaluation. But we really do need to see them. And they get this great thing. They go to the most expert site in South Florida that really understands post-viral illness, and they get a thorough evaluation. It's a big plus.
And where do they sign up for this? Because I know we're going to get tons of individuals.
Go to my webpage.
Good.
Here's a link, and there's a QR code. You can click the QR code. It takes you to a short little survey, another little short survey that finds out if you recovered or you didn't recover, if you live in our area, and where you got your health care. We're trying to figure out who your healthcare systems, if you went to Baptist or Broward Health or whatever your healthcare system might be. And whether or not you're in there, we still want you to come through. It was just how we filter people into different things. I have something proud to say about this study. Because we recruited through this way where we didn't just ask for volunteers or recruit from our clinics, but rather we went from the healthcare systems, we have the most beautifully representative demographic of this community. More than half of our study subjects are Hispanic, as is our community. 17% are African American, as is our community. It's beautifully done, and you won't see that in most studies. So we're trying to stay true to our community, and we need to know whether or not people who had this illness, if they have a higher risk for this or that, depending on being Hispanic or non-Hispanic or Black or white or whatever, but also age and when you got sick. When did the symptoms start? Was it with Delta or with Alpha or Beta or Omicron? All these things are important questions.
So right now, we need people to go to the website,
Mm-hmm.
click the QR code, if I could say that 10 times fast.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in South Florida and you're dealing with COVID long hauler, you're having symptoms of fatigue, exhaustion, exercise-induced malaise, any of those types of things, please, please, please sign up for this trial today.
Absolutely. Please do.
Perfect.
Thank you.